Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started on our Building Bridges Across the Laboratory community webinar for today. Welcome, everyone. I'm Allie Brown. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at ASCP, and I am your co-moderator for the Building Bridges series. Oh, Rodney, I think you're on mute. The man who cannot be muted. Come on, man.
That's why I hate hitting that button early. My apologies, everyone. Again, welcome today. I'm Dr. Rodney Rohde, Regents Professor and Chair of the Medical Laboratory Science Program and fellow co-moderator of this series. As a reminder, this series is being launched in collaboration with the CDC as part of the One Lab initiative in order to highlight stories of collaboration and partnership that have addressed laboratory workforce challenges.
And we'd like to gratefully acknowledge that this resource was made possible by funding from the CDC. However, ASCP is solely responsible for its content, and the viewpoints shared do not necessarily represent those of CDC.
And today's session will feature three really fantastic case studies on the topic of partnerships supporting laboratory training and fellowships, something near and dear to my heart. And it will be followed by a Q&A series, so that'll be great. And then we'll wrap up the session with some reminders.
So go ahead.
It's also important to remind everyone that we will offer one CMOE credit for today's webinar. Credit claiming instructions will be provided in a follow-up email shared tomorrow via Zoom. And I'll share it with Allie now.
Oh, sure. Before we get started, I just want to quickly share a few housekeeping notes. All lines are going to be muted, so if you have any questions for our panelists, put them in that Q&A chat box that you can find the icon for at the bottom of your screen. My co-facilitator and I will moderate those questions at the end of the session. Closed captioning for this webinar is available and is enabled for any interested parties. And then additional resources, including a link to the recording of this session, will be available about 2 weeks from now on our website. So at this point, I'd like to ask each speaker to briefly introduce themselves before starting their case study. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to Dr. Fritzinger to get started.
Thank you, and thank you to ASCP for having me. This is something I'm also very passionate about, so I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Dr. Angela Fritzinger, former Deputy Director of Virginia's Public Health Laboratory, the Division of Consolidated Laboratory Services. Would you like for me to go ahead and present, or did you want to do kind of an around the room of the instructors or presenters rather?
Go ahead and present, and then everyone,
okay.
Our next presenter could just introduce themselves at that time. Thanks.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So as I said, I'm here representing the Division of Consolidated Laboratory Services and a collaboration of our public health laboratory in Virginia with a local university, the Virginia Commonwealth University, and I'll refer to that as VCU. The whole real reason or purpose for this collaboration stemmed from a shared vision of Dr. Denise Toney, who is the current laboratory director at DCLS, and Dr. Teresa Nader, who is or was formerly the chair of the Clinical Laboratory Sciences program at VCU. And they really, they're wonderful mentors and are also very passionate about public health and getting students involved and excited about the field. And their vision really was to leverage the resources that each had to offer to build a certificate or concentration program that would benefit both entities. So on the laboratory side, we would be reaching students with the intent of essentially creating a talented pipeline of qualified laboratory scientists that would be eligible for positions at the laboratory. This, of course, would then help to address critical gaps at DCLS, as well as other public health laboratories. If students were exposed to the field and decided to, move out of state, if they were attending VCU from another state and go to their home state, they would at least have that skill set and knowledge moving forward. And it would also then therefore create opportunities for advancement within the lab. Similarly, there are a lot of benefits for the university as well. Students in the clinical laboratory sciences program are able to participate in clinical lab rotations and get a great fundamental background in the sciences related to public health, but it's not presented in that public health context, or even in the public health laboratory sciences realm. So this would be enhancing their experiences through laboratory activities and through lecture format. It also incorporates other health services that they might not otherwise be aware of in that traditional classroom setting. So it's really providing them an enhanced experience. Next slide, please. So it was a long road, and I don't have time to go into the details today, but it took us about 2 to 3 years of actively putting this idea to form and into being. As I said, I'm the former deputy director. I am now a consultant, and I can't leave public health, so or DCLS. So I was able to participate in this event by really developing the curriculum that we were thinking of. So we tried to identify topic areas that were not already included in the existing master's CLS program so that we wouldn't have unnecessary redundancies, but really hone in on what is unique about public health laboratory science. And that's also really important to emphasize. This is about the laboratory science. There are numerous public health programs out there in academia, but they, in general, they seem to focus more on administration and policy and not so much on laboratory sciences. So this is a really well-defined, unique niche, I think. So after identifying what the gaps were, so to speak, for this particular purpose, we grouped them into 3 essential lectures, and they're outlined here. So we have a fundamentals of kind of what is public health, epidemiology, and laboratory surveillance. Again, some of these things might have been touched on in their earlier lecture work that's part of their traditional program in the CLS program. But here, again, we're looking at what's unique to public health. Specific laboratory techniques that they may not see in the clinical laboratories, and our role in emergency response and preparedness. And finally, quality and ethics. Of course, there's a lot of overlap there, but then similarly, there's a lot that's unique to public health, as we have to sometimes, navigate through HIPAA, and we have exceptions and such. After completion of the 3 courses, students have an opportunity to participate in a practicum that would be completed at DCLS. So students could pick from one of 4 concentrations, public health food microbiology, newborn screening, or one of 2 molecular paths. One, just identification and characterization, and another one that offers more advanced technologies, such as next generation sequencing. Next slide, please. So we developed this curriculum, and again, briefly, we did try to approach, it's called SHEV, it's the Council for Higher Education in Virginia. And we were thinking of a certificate program to complement a bachelor's degree. That did not go through. So we tried to pivot and do an accelerated bachelor's to master's. That didn't go over well either, but we were able to solidify and get approved the concentration in public health laboratory sciences for the master's program. So the format that we were ascribed to was to use the Canvas platform. I've been out of it for 20 years, so I wasn't really familiar with this. The younger folks on the call might be, but it's essentially a virtual platform where students can take classes and engage with fellow classmates, and instructors. So this is completely asynchronous. I'm not live. I can post videos, but everything is done in a way where students can access material and complete assignments online, which in this space is so important because a lot of the students are in this master's program are completing clinical rotations as part of their curriculum. They may be married, have children, and are also working to put themselves through school. So they are able to complete this work when they're doing all of these other things. So it's extremely flexible. And in doing that, and with the short launch time that we had once we finally got it approved, it was like, okay, it got approved. We really want you to do it in the fall. It starts in a month. So we had been doing work in the background, but we did launch pretty quickly. And to do that, I kind of stole some publicly available content, all attributed to the developers. But there's some really great resources out there. So I used material from APHL's Learning Portal, CDC Train, Virginia's Train, and also the University of Albany has a phenomenal public health continuing education program with some really great material. So I pulled from those. And then anything else that we didn't have, I created in collaboration with DCLS. And so we developed that and branded it and launched that in our program. Next slide, please. I'm watching my time, so we're good. So we were finally able to launch, and it was big news in Virginia, and it was out on various media platforms. In the fall, we launched the fundamentals course. So, and again, the strategy for the how and when the courses would be available were aligned with the existing curriculum requirements that the students were facing, what they traditionally would take in the fall or spring semesters, and when their clinical rotations would be. So we tried to have it make sense and to follow and then supplement material that they're already getting in school. So we started with the fundamentals course last fall. It went really well, and we're still getting feedback from that now. And then this spring, so what we're currently offering are the other two classes, the laboratory techniques and emergency preparedness and response, along with quality and ethics. One important thing I want to mention from this collaboration that helped make it possible and really get interest, I think, is that APHL provided scholarship funding to students enrolled in the actual concentration. One thing I will note here also is that there are these 3 courses and the practicum that are required in order for the student to get the concentration associated with their master's, but other students that are interested in these courses that don't necessarily want to complete the entire concentration can still take them. So in my mind, that's still helping to reach people. Last slide, please. So a few lessons learned that I wanted to make sure that we shared, and I kind of touched on some of these, is to leverage the partnerships that you already have and find people with similar goals and interests. Network, share your ideas. If you at a meeting and going out to eat, or even at the water fountain, you never know where you might find that next partner in crime. And really need to be willing to facilitate communication between the different parties. Denise was really a go-between in the beginning between myself and representatives at VCU. And then also I've had to serve as a liaison sometimes and just do that communication piece. Anticipate obstacles and have a backup plan. And I say that, our example I gave with Chev, it didn't get approved right away. So that was our, pie in the sky goal. And we just, dialed it back a little bit. And then being flexible and willing to start small. So we're definitely learning. Like I said, we're getting feedback. And with that, we'll be able to make the necessary improvements and hopefully offer, a really polished product each year moving forward. So my contact information and the contact information for Dr. Tony is on the following slide if you all have any follow-up questions after today. Thank you again so much for the opportunity.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Karen Honeycutt, and I'm very honored to serve as the director of the University of Nebraska Medical Center's Medical Laboratory Science Program. I want to thank you for the invitation for me to describe some collaborations that our program participates in so that we can hopefully increase educational opportunities. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with our establishment of a rural distance education network. Our program received some HRSA funding in the late 1980s. Our clinical laboratory education was just in the metropolitan area of Omaha on the eastern side of the state. And the purpose of the funding was to decentralize that across the entire state of Nebraska. Our program is 1 year in length. Our first phase is 11 and a half weeks during the summer, and students do have to be physically on one of two campuses, either the Omaha campus or the Kearney campus, which is in the central part of the state, for the summer. And we focus on basic technical skills and basic theory. And after that phase, the students transition to their clinical site community, which hopefully will be their home community or very close to their home community. And they finish out the program there, doing their rotations, as well as completing all of the coursework using distance education technologies. We had our first graduate from the distance education model in 1991, and it really functions the way it was originally intended to do. We continue to use the network today. This next cohort for the next academic year, we will, in the state of Nebraska, have 14 clinical sites that will host students for 9 months. That's quite a commitment. And 9 of those clinical sites are in rural communities. So as you do with grant work, you start presenting how you utilize the funding and the work that you did. Next slide, please. And we started getting inquiries from other universities that didn't have clinical laboratory science programs. We started first with the University of Missouri at Columbia. They had closed their program and were having workforce issues, surprise, surprise. And so they wanted to figure out how we could collaborate. They said, you have this established distance education network that functions in the state of Nebraska. Why not expand that outside of the state? So we came up with a model in which the home university, which would be Mizzou, would recruit students locally. They would recruit clinical sites. The students paid resident tuition to Mizzou so that they didn't have to pay non-resident tuition to UNMC, which can be 2 to 3 times higher than in-state tuition. The program, the Mizzou degree program would accept our professional education credits. So all of our curricula needs to be approved by all of our university partners, and they will grant the degree. UNMC is responsible for providing all of the professional education. Our contract students are considered visiting students. They have access to everything that our UNMC students have access to. We work with the clinical sites. We continue to work with those students throughout the program until they graduate, and they complete our NACLS accredited program, which allows them to sit for national certification exams. A barrier with this model is that those students that come from Charleston, South Carolina, they do have to come to either Omaha or Kearney for the summer, the first phase of the program. That gets very expensive for them. And it can be a barrier. So that is a known barrier to our model. We keep our program at 1 year. One major reason is because of our contract partners. So all of our MLS programs are very rigorous, but ours is incredibly fast paced. And so our students often don't have the time nor the energy to do extracurricular activities. And what tends to suffer is engaging students in professional organizations. As an educator, I think it's incredibly important that we instill in our students that to advocate for our profession as well as quality patient care, we need to work through our professional societies, and it's really hard in that one-year model to get students engaged. Next slide, please. Another collaboration that we have is we work with our state college system. This is a mandate from our state legislature, so it is funded by the Nebraska taxpayers. It's called the Rural Health Opportunities Program, and seniors in high school that live in rural Nebraska can apply for the program if they are interested in entering one of these 10 professions. If they are accepted into the program, they complete their undergraduate or pre-professional work through the college, the state college system, and it's a full ride. They get a full scholarship, and they also get a guaranteed seat if they meet all of the RHOP criteria and requirements in their desired professional program. The handshake agreement is that graduates agree to go back and work in a rural community. So that's been a good pipeline for us. We hold 10 slots for our RHOP, or 12 slots for our RHOP students. This upcoming cohort, 5 of our matriculants will be RHOP students. So every year, about 50 to 60% of those full ride scholarship monies aren't used. So anyone in the audience, if you're from rural Nebraska and you're interested in this pipeline or recruiting for this pipeline, please feel free to reach out to me. Next slide. And the last collaboration that I'm going to discuss is one that we have with 12 local public high school districts. Each year we can accommodate 90 students, and they are part of what we call the High School Alliance. Those students every afternoon for a full academic year spend their time on our campus from 1 to 3. UNMC faculty teach courses along with a certified high school teacher because the courses do count towards their high school diploma. MLS teaches a semester-long infectious disease course. We have a clinical pathologist that facilitates a clinical pathology course. And we don't have anything to do with the anatomy course, but it's a great experience if students are interested because they actually get to work in the gross anatomy lab. The intent is for the courses to be about 40 to 50% hands-on time. So our infectious disease course happens twice a week. And so one day they're in class and one day they are working in lab. The intent of the High School Alliance was to expose individuals to various health professions, but also to really focus on the interprofessional nature of healthcare. Currently, our High School Alliance only occurs on our Omaha campus, but we are working very, very hard to extend that to our Kearney campus, which happens in the central part of our state, to provide some of these services to those communities. Next slide, please. Lessons learned. Have we learned any lessons? Yeah, we've learned a lot of lessons. When we created our Nebraska Rural Distance Education Network, we really doubled the capacity size of our program. That's the good news. The bad news is we don't fill all of our seats each year. We also don't fill our RHOP seats. And so student recruitment is incredibly important. Recruit, recruit, recruit. And those opportunities don't just happen. They need to be proactive, planned, purposeful, and you need to have patience, because if you're talking to middle schoolers, and we need to talk to middle schoolers, it's going to take a while before they enter programs and are going to be able to be hired as a medical laboratory professional. I always tell my dean the phrase, if you build it, they will come. That is not my experience with MLS education. We need to recruit and we need to market. The next 2 lessons learned, I think, fall under the umbrella of my hat in terms of, am I advocating for my MLS program or am I advocating for the profession? And I think these 2 indicate that I need to advocate for the profession. So when we go into a new community trying to develop some relationships, we never ever want to undercut programs that are already utilizing clinical slots. The point is to increase educational opportunities. And so if they can expand what they're doing in terms of taking students, that's absolutely wonderful. But we don't want to become a barrier to programs that are already functioning efficiently. The next lesson learned is this is about increasing educational opportunities. Sometimes our collaborators say, hey, it's been great working with you, but we think that we have found another way, another pathway to provide accessible, affordable education that might work better than what we're doing with you. I, as the advocate for the profession, my role in that situation is to say, that's absolutely wonderful. What can I do to help get you from point A to point B? So it's not about accolades for the program, and it's not about accolades for UNMC, and it's not about putting finances in our coffers. It's about increasing the number of laboratory professionals that we graduate. I'm very privileged to work at a university that also shares that philosophy, and they back me up on that. And the last lesson learned, and this is maybe a little on the personal side for me, because when I get ready to go into one of these innovative, think outside the box conversations, I need to very deliberately change my mindset. Naturally, I'm the person that will say, yes, but it's not going to work because of that. Not going to work because of that. Just isn't going to work. And I need to change it to the yes. And what about this? Maybe we should look into adding this collaborator to this potential idea. It allows the idea to evolve. It provides some motivation around the idea, and momentum. And so it hopefully will motivate people that are going to have to do all the hard work to make this new innovative idea come to life. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Winter. I am the Chief of the Training and Workforce Development Branch within the Division of Laboratory Systems at CDC. And I'm here to give a little bit of an overview of One Lab and what we've learned in the first few years of this initiative. Next slide, please. All right, so I thought it would be helpful to level set by sharing a little bit about the various elements of One Lab initiative before we talk about its growth and our lessons learned. So we have 7 elements of One Lab initiative, and the purpose of this initiative is to bring together all the labs of the U.S., whether clinical, public health, academic, commercial labs, to create an online, ongoing learning community, which serves us both in times of preparedness and also ultimately in times of response. And so to do that, we started with an emergency response task funded during the emergency response to COVID-19. So this would have been early on in 2020 with a small pot of seed funding to explore some of these opportunities. And then thanks to funding through the American Rescue Plan, we were able to expand this substantially. So there are 7 elements, and together they create this online ongoing learning community. So starting with One Lab assessments, you might think of formal training needs assessments, which we certainly do. We did a full-on training needs assessment back in 2021, but we also want to remain responsive to what's happening right now. So a lot of what we do in this area is hearing directly from members of the One Lab network and One Lab test at our live events through emails. We encourage people to just send us a line anytime they want about topics that are of interest and whatnot, so that we can push materials out much more quickly. So next we have One Lab Summit. So this is our 3-day online conference that we bring together laboratory professionals to talk about training needs and their solutions to challenges they face. So the most recent One Lab Summit was actually last week. We had over 2,000 people sign up for that, and we had about 1,300 people join us live for the 3 days. And we know from past experience that a lot more people will download those materials once they're online and available, because we will post all of the recordings on the website. Next, we have One Lab Network. So One Lab Network is our all of our laboratory professionals from these public health labs, clinical labs, academic labs, commercial labs, anyone who works in a lab and has any involvement in training and education is welcome to join One Lab Network. All of these aspects of One Lab, I just want to point out, are free because they're all funded with federal government funds. And One Lab Network offers an opportunity to deliver live training monthly. And so we have a live One Lab Network event. And for those who can't join us live, we do post that within about a week or two online, both the slides and a recording of the event. And we use topics that are most timely to whatever is happening right then. As far as if there is a new outbreak or something of that nature, we will adjust our calendar to make room to provide training on that. One Lab Reach is our learning management system that brings together all of our free online materials. One Lab Test is an acronym for Timely Education and Support of Testers. So this is our companion to the One Lab Network, but this is specifically for those who conduct testing or perform testing in non-laboratory settings. So think point of care sites, nursing homes, schools, etc. Then we have One Lab VR. This is our virtual reality environment. It's a 50,000 square foot lab. It's actually technically 12 labs in virtual reality. And we have been disseminating headsets to labs across America, public health and clinical labs, in small amounts through a collaboration with APHL to make sure that labs have an opportunity to try out this technology. And in the years to come, we will be expanding that One Lab VR to facilitate live training. So right now it's just on-demand training, practice scenarios on things like centrifuge and the biosafety cabinet, etc. But with time, laboratory professionals will have an opportunity to go in there and create a private instance of training and deliver whatever kind of training they would like to with their own staff in VR. And also, finally, we have our One Lab resources. So this is our blanket terminology for all the online training materials that we offer, job aids, e-learning courses, etc. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit more about One Lab Reach. We rarely explain what the acronym stands for, but it's Rapid Education and Capacity Building Hub. And we built this learning management system to be a one-stop shop for free web-based laboratory training resources created by CDC and our partners. So over time, we're adding more materials that were developed in collaboration with our partners. So on One Lab Reach, you'll find an assortment of live and recorded webinars, printable and video job aids. We offer a live training of trainers program that trains laboratory professionals to deliver more effective training, particularly in an online environment. We also offer on-demand e-learning courses, One Lab VR, which I referenced earlier, and then coming very soon, we'll be offering mini lessons. So these would be short form online courses that are more in the 10 to 15-minute range, as well as interactive job aids. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a look at January of 2023 versus January 2024 as far as how many people accessed our courses on One Lab Reach. And so you'll see here about a 5-fold increase in the number of course registrations for our e-learning courses, the job aids, more than a 5-fold increase, and overall about a 3-fold increase in how many people were accessing our training materials on One Lab Reach. All right, next slide, please. So I'm excited to announce that we are now up to 24,000 unique members of One Lab. And so for something that launched in 2021, that's, we would say, fairly impressive. And that is due in large part to the hard work of our partners. So I wanted to make sure I recognize all of our cooperative agreement partners. So American Society for Clinical Pathology, ACP, who brought us here today, American Society for Clinical Laboratory Science, or ASCLS, as well as the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, University of Maryland, Baltimore, and the Association of Public Health Laboratories, or APHL. And so together with our partners, we have grown this network. And now you can see the fruits of that as far as not only how many people have joined these various communities of practice, but also in terms of how many people are registering for our trainings. So in the first two quarters of this fiscal year, we've had 168,000 registrations for our courses, which is just shy of how many we had all of last fiscal year. So I just want to thank all of our partners for helping us get the word out so that we can offer all of these free trainings. Next slide, please. And here's a look at One Lab members by state. So you can see there is a lot of variation across the states. For those who are curious, California has about 1,600 members now, and Texas and Georgia are coming in second and third right now with close to 900 members each. And the states that we're most actively hoping to increase membership in are Delaware, Rhode Island, and Wyoming, which each have a couple dozen members. And I also wanted to point out that we have about 1,500 members from the Philippines. So really excited that we have a lot of people joining us internationally from various locations. Certainly our mission is specifically domestic because of how we're funded, but we're always glad when labs across the globe can use those free materials as well. Next slide, please. So as far as lessons learned, one of the lessons that I always stress is that we take what we call a minimum viable product approach. So for those who aren't familiar with this, it's used a lot in the private sector, particularly in the tech industry, which is to really embrace this idea of perfect being the enemy of the good. So rather than worrying about what you ultimately want to deliver as far as all the bells and whistles with something like One Lab Reach, which is already pretty interactive, we'd like to think and engaging, rather than working to first get all of those features up and running before we released it, we instead decided what is the bare minimum, what are the features that people need on the site for it to be useful at all, and then launched it in the summer of 2022, what we call soft launch. So we don't shout it from the rooftops, we just have it available online and start gathering feedback from our partners to see if what we really had in mind as far as the other features that are needed are where we should focus. And so that approach has been really helpful for us, both in terms of One Lab Reach, but also in terms of the materials we develop. So things like job aids, what we do with e-learning courses. I remember the first time, probably about 5 years ago, I just stopped and asked a partner, hey, I know we're talking about videos and e-learning courses, all these things, but if I could get you a job aid in a month or two, would that be helpful rather than having to wait about a year to get this e-learning course? And they were like, absolutely. And so that really helped change our thinking, those kinds of conversations, to say, hey, why don't we start with something like a printable job aid, a one-pager infographic, or a live webinar that we can offer. And then we take that and use that as the foundation for creating something more long-term and enduring, like an e-learning course or a virtual reality. And I want to really call out not just our clinical coag partners that I've already referenced, and our partners through the One Lab Coag and APHL through our longstanding cooperative agreement with them as well. But additionally, all of the individual members of One Lab who step up every month and offer to present, suggest topics, really give us great feedback on what they want to see next. And it's through all of that information that we continue to expand One Lab. And so that is one of the biggest lessons learned for us, is to play to our partners' strengths, but also get our partners to introduce us to yet additional partners, and also be open to those one-on-one relationships where we might have someone who's from a very small lab with 2 or 3 staff, and that person offers to present and shares what they have with the greater community. And so we're really excited to see where this goes moving forward. Next slide. And I just want to plug the website again. You can either use the link that's been dropped in the chat or just go directly to cdc.gov/OneLab. And next slide, please. And finally, I also wanted to put in a huge plug for the Career Pathways and Public Health Laboratory Science program. So this is another initiative that CDC has funded through a different American Rescue Plan funding line. And that is to offer fellowships and internships in public health labs and state, local, and territorial public health labs. And so for more information on that, I really encourage you to go to aphl.org/career pathways. Really spread the word. It's been an incredible opportunity to prepare people to enter the laboratory workforce, or for those who've never heard of labs, to get them thinking about lab careers. Thank you.
Okay, we're now entering the Q&A portion of our webinar, and we have a few questions already in the chat. If you guys can put them in the Q&A, I will check the chat as well, but there is that separate Q&A function. So let me see. I think the first set of questions is for Dr. Fritzinger. And the question is, what is your current enrollment in your program? And then if you could comment a little bit more on why the certificate plus bachelor's degree model did not work.
Okay. And I think that Debbie just put that in the chat. Thank you. It's small now. We had 4 students in our fall fundamentals course. We have 2 currently in quality and ethics and 4 in the laboratory techniques, emergency preparedness and response. 1 student has consistently taken all 3 courses and plans to participate in the practicum at the end of the semester. And I do have 1 student that took the fundamentals and is also taking the quality and ethics that continued on. Regarding Chev, my understanding from their feedback was that they did not believe the state laboratory really had a workforce problem. I can hear all of the cheers, right, from those on the call, because laboratorians, they're a dime a dozen. Yeah, so they didn't feel that there was a real challenge there, and that we only hired master's and PhD level scientists, not bachelors, even with a letter of support from APHL and our own data that Dr. Tony had been collating for years about workforce challenges was not enough for them to reconsider the program. And the master's, the accelerated bachelor's to master's program, I don't remember exactly what it was, but that was actually, I believe, it stopped at BCU in their administration, that they weren't fully in support of it. And I think they had a different idea of wanting that certificate or concentration element.
Angela, can I ask just a quick follow-up question? I'm just
Sure.
curious. When those students finish that public health concentration, are they still eligible for the MLS certification and or some type of categorical in microbiology? I'm just curious.
I don't know what's required for that MLS certification outside of education. That wasn't my career path. But as far as their education, they're still getting their master's in clinical laboratory sciences. I believe Dr. Tony might be on the call. She had a conflict with another meeting. She might be able to answer that. As far as I know, it would only enhance their qualifications to sit for those boards. But that's all I can really comment on that.
That's kind of what I was wondering. If they're in a master's program for that particular degree, they're probably still eligible for MLS certification. I just wasn't sure if they were kind of doing all that curriculum still. That's great.
Yes. Thanks.
Okay, another question that has come up for Dr. Honeycutt. If you are working with the State School Counselors Association at ASCP, we've been working with them a bit with our workforce initiatives. Do you have experience working with them?
So that's a great question. In terms of recruitment, we have a couple of resources. We have a college level resource, and our College of Allied Health Professions, they on an annual basis reach out to all advisors and all counselors at all levels. They bring them all together and present to them and provide some updates. Internally within our program, again, because we aren't filling our seats, we have a full-time staff position that is an MLS professional, and half of her time is spent doing recruiting. And she doesn't wait for people to come to her. She calls people and says, do you want to learn about this? So she reaches out to local high schools, state high schools as well, making sure that we do touch base with the counselors and advisors, community colleges. We try to cast a broad net.
It sounds like an amazing program, Dr. Honeycutt. I'm curious, in light of the workforce shortages across the country, and let me applaud your Nebraska legislative process for all that funding. Wow, I'm jealous. Would an out-of-state person, if they were to perhaps maybe agree to work in a rural area, would that satisfy it, or does it has to be Nebraska probably?
For the Rural Health Opportunities Program, it has to be, student needs to be from a rural
Yep.
Nebraska community,
Okay.
since it is funded by Nebraska taxpayers. But if you want to learn how to set something like that up in your state, feel free to reach out. So it's really kind of neat in that with MLS, but College of Medicine, if you have if you have someone interested in the College of Medicine, if they get accepted into the RHOP program and they meet all of those program requirements, they have a guaranteed spot in medical school, dental school, pharmacy.
That's a great resource. Yeah, that's fantastic. Someone had a question, Dr. Honeycutt, about your distance graduate, about how far that they had to travel.
So in terms of our contract partners, the furthest one away is Charleston Southern University. That's in South Carolina. I honestly don't know how far that is, but when they drive, it takes them probably 3 or 4 days. It's a commitment to come here and go through that program. So they're here for the summer and then they go back to their home community for 9 months, and they don't need to come back to Nebraska again, unless they want to come visit.
And we've had a lot of questions kind of around the same theme. We have a lot of people listening who are perhaps practicing internationally or have been educated internationally. And so I guess just in general for you all, what are the options? Are there options for people with international credentials or education? I guess starting with Dr. Fritzinger.
I think I can comment on that, but I have to defer to Dr. Tony as things may have changed. The only issues that I think there might be with students that are not U.S. citizens would be if they were seeking to do work with select agents, because that requires clearance through the select agent program, and they have to complete an FBI background check. For the other areas, I don't think it's an issue, and I think we've had students. And I think the same also applies for APHL, and their fellowship and internship programs have changed in recent years. I was a fellow in the early days. I was class 10 EID fellow, so it's over 20 years ago. And they even had an international fellowship and internship program that's specific for those students. So that was a whole nother avenue. I know there are a lot of resource materials on their website, and I think that that's been provided. Even if you just go to aphl.org, it's pretty easy to navigate and see what they have. Also, CDC has fellowships as well, and I believe that they also accept students that are not U.S. citizens.
All right, thank you for speaking to that. Oh, and I think it looks like Dr. Tony just noted that all students would be eligible to take the courses through VCU. Another question about for Dr. Honeycutt about you mentioning the requirement for the on-campus portion of your training, excuse me. Is that on-campus attendance, do you consider that, or have you heard that that's a significant barrier to enrollment?
Yes, and so we are providing the baccalaureate level MLS professional education, and we just haven't figured out how to do the technical, hands-on technical skill training via distance. So students do need to be on campus. We try to make that as efficient as possible. It's 11.5 weeks. But yes, is that a barrier? Absolutely, it is a barrier. We do have an MLT to MLS program that students do part-time. That is totally online because MLTs already have those technical skills. And so there isn't an on-campus component with that.
And if I could just jump in real fast, because I see Jim Crawford's note about virtual technical training. There's been a lot of call for CDC to expand OneLab VR to offer some of that hands-on training in a different way. And so that is very much something that we're interested in working with partners on.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
VR demos that we've had available are really cool.
Yeah, I was going to mention too, to Jim and Kelly's point, and the idea of virtual training. One of the things I've always kind of thought about, and just kind of throwing it out here, is, I wish that educational academic programs and clinical sites, clinical training sites around the country would even look at models where perhaps if a student agreed to come to work for a particular entity, that the onboarding piece could be a part of their clinical training. I know we'd have to work with NACLs and some other entities, but I think it would really help smooth out some of our clinical issues, because then you're not always, to Karen's point, you're not overlapping clinical training sites. You may be able to be a more streamlined issue, but I know it comes down to, bigger barriers sometimes in that, but it seems like it would be helpful.
And Dr. Crawford notes here that virtual training would need to be recognized by any like by NACLs or by whoever is the certifying or accrediting agency. I don't know if there's a model for that for others.
I don't either. I think it would be challenging, and I love everything Kelly and OneLab's doing. I absolutely love it. I think we have to look at all, to Karen's point, yes, and
Mhm.
we need to think about these models, but I still think it's tough to get some skills across without, working in the laboratory. And that's kind of was that thought of, can we make it part of onboarding employment, and then maybe the student agrees to work there for 2 years at least, or something like that, one of those types of situations. But we'll see. I would love the day where virtual training was 100% spot on. I just don't know if it'll get there.
Is there any virtual component to your training program, Dr. Rohde?
There really isn't, other than, sometimes we use some of the models out there, like with certain industries that have digital slide reading and different things like that we can utilize. And, we do a lot of animation and video watching and things like that, but it's still really difficult to teach a student how to do a clinical gram stain without doing a clinical gram stain.
And perhaps
I mean, you can teach the reading of the slide, right? But you can't teach the skill of making the slide sometimes.
the manual stuff.
Yeah.
And do most of your students stay in the area to practice?
They do, but we do see a handful of our students that love that, today's student wants to move.
Mm.
They want to be a traveling medical lab scientist, at least at some level. We do try to talk to them about how important it is to maybe work for a year or two, because most travelers, they're putting you in hot spots that need you to hit the ground running. So, but it seems like more and more right out of school want to move, want to go work in New York, want to go work in, wherever. They're looking to go out, even internationally. So this group of students is different than, say, 20, 30 years ago.
I'll just chime in and say that I thought when I graduated with my doctorate degree, I wanted to go, my heart was set on working for CDC and stomping around in mud puddles in Africa. Like, that was my dream. And after completing my fellowship at DCLS, I didn't want to work anywhere else. That was it was CDC in my own backyard, and I didn't even know.
Right.
So
I love that.
That's great. Well, thank you to all of our presenters today. We're going to share our wrap-up information at this point. 3 great presentations and really inspiring and helpful with our shared missions. We've got a few upcoming opportunities and events that we'd like to share. Our next webinar will be on May 15th, and it's going to feature 3 case studies on the value of regional partnerships and laboratory twinning from APHL and health departments in Missouri, Michigan, and Alaska. as well as a presentation on a large-scale regional biosafety training that was conducted for both clinical and public health partners.
What a great opportunity for that. I'm looking forward to that one. With support from CDC, ASCP has launched a new DEI-focused laboratory workforce scholarship available to candidates from underrepresented groups and underserved areas of the United States looking to pursue higher education or specialization in the medical laboratory arena. This scholarship is open to a wide range of candidates, including high school seniors interested in starting their lab science careers. That's wonderful. But we'd love to have your support in sharing this opportunity with those who may be interested. So for more information, please check out the website at supportcdc1lab.org. And as a reminder, we'll be offering 1 CMLE credit for this webinar. Instructions will be mailed to attendees tomorrow via Zoom. Credit can only be claimed by live attendees within 1 month of the webinar date.
And if you have any questions that weren't addressed during today's session, you can feel free to email us at grants, that's grant with a S, at ascp.org. And with that, we'd like to thank you all for coming to today's webinar and listening. And we encourage you to visit our site where you'll find more information on all of these opportunities at supportcdc1lab.org.